So True Detective just kicked off a brand new season, Season 4, titled Night Country, and this stars Jodie Foster, John Hawkes, and Callie Reis. And today I want to give you my review / breakdown and maybe some theories and really just some overall thoughts for episode 1. I'm going to go ahead and issue a spoiler warning because I'm going to go through the episode pretty thoroughly and get into kind of a scene-by-scene breakdown, just going through the details and everything, so you have been warned. Here we go. In Ennis, Alaska, the men that operate a research station vanish. To solve the case, detectives Danvers and Navarro will have to confront the darkness themselves and dig into the haunted truths that lie buried beneath the eternal ice. Alright, so episode 1 opens up with a quote that says, "For we do not know what beasts the night dreams when its hours grow too long for even God to be awake." Hildred Castaigne. And did a quick little research there, and Hildred Castaigne is not a person, it's actually a character, and it comes from this story called The Repairer of Reputations, written by this guy named Robert W. Chambers, and it is actually a short story in the collection called The Yellow King. And that was sort of my first, I guess, reveal, as the Yellow King played a significant role in Season 1, as there were large elements of Season 1 of True Detective that connected back to that story, the Yellow King. So right from the get-go, it seems that Season 4 is going to have some sort of connection to Season 1 and that story. And even in just looking at the quote itself, I can't help but think there is going to be some sort of supernatural element to this story, and with the mention of God and the beasts of the night, it seems that we're right from the beginning perhaps delving into some cosmic type horror. Again, this is just sort of speculation on this point, but as the episode progressed, I think I feel pretty safe in saying that's kind of where this season seems to be headed. So we open up in Ennis, Alaska, 150 miles from the Arctic Circle. It's December 17th, the last sunset of the year, and we see this hunter out in the middle of nowhere hunting reindeer or caribou. And I do have to say, the CGI here on the caribou doesn't look great. So was a little unimpressed by that, but outside of that, the opening definitely had me intrigued, as all of a sudden the sun goes down, darkness sets in, and these caribou act like they are all of a sudden possessed and taken over by some sort of dark force as the entire herd of them run off a cliff. And again, there's just this sort of feeling there that there is something supernatural going on. And immediately my mind went to a story in the Bible, and this may be a bit of a stretch, but I couldn't help and notice that there was a bit of a similarity, as there's a story in the Bible where Jesus sends these demons into this group of pigs, and they're possessed by these demons, and they also run off of a cliff together as well. And so, again, maybe there's something supernatural going on here. I know that connection may seem like speculation, but it seemed similar enough to me that it kind of triggered my mind. And so, again, seems like we're heading into supernatural territory here. After this, we go to Salal, which is the Arctic research station where all the scientists are at. And we don't really get much of an introduction to any of the characters here. They're just kind of going around the research station, sort of doing their own thing, until we see one of the scientists look like he's going into some sort of convulsion. He's shaking pretty violently, then suddenly stops, turns around, and whispers, "She's awake." We then cut to 3 days later, December 20th. The food supplier shows up at the research station only to find it's completely empty. Everyone is gone. We don't know what happens. He's walking around. It seems for a brief second we see someone whisk by the screen really fast. We don't know if it's a person or exactly what it is. He's walking around and then finds a severed human tongue on the floor. Here's where Jodie Foster shows up. Her character is Detective Danvers, and she shows up on the scene with father and son, who happen to be her co-workers. Then they investigate the tongue, and she is able to conclude that the tongue belongs to a native woman. It has some odd markings on it as well, which she says comes from repairing a fishing net. Also, too, I couldn't help notice a small little Easter egg when she is trying to shut off the Ferris Bueller twist and shout scene. You can see a DVD of The Thing on the shelf. Obviously, there are some similarities between the stories here. After this, they're back at the station, and Danvers connects with Navarro, played by Callie Reis, and she thinks the tongue belongs to a woman from a year ago on an old cold case file that she has been working on. And this scene, there clearly seems to be some tension here that is established, as this is the first scene between Danvers and Navarro's characters where they are sharing screen time together. One of the big things about this first episode is that I feel like they spent probably about 2/3 of it really developing characters and the relationships between the characters, and only about 1/3 of it on the actual story and plot. And that's not necessarily a negative thing, just more of an observation. And I was pretty surprised, as this is actually only going to be a 6-episode season compared to the usual 8 from the previous 3 seasons. It seems like we've got a pretty big kind of, I don't know, world that we're working with. There's a lot of characters, kind of a lot going on here. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they kind of are able to, I don't want to say for sure yet, but it almost seems like they've bitten off more they can chew. It just seems like a pretty big sort of world with lots of characters just for a 6-episode series. So it's obviously too early to make a definitive judgment call on that yet, but we'll see what happens. Not long after this, the relationship between Danvers and her daughter, Leah, is established, and it is a little bit rocky, to say the least, as her daughter is in trouble for making some videos she shouldn't have been making with her girlfriend. And also, too, it's not explicitly said, but I don't think that Danvers is her biological mother. And so there is a history there hinted at with the father. There's some tension there. They almost get hit by a drunk driver. So you introduce this woman by the name of Stacy, and she's this drunk, and Danvers ends up putting her into the jail cell for the night. However, they establish another connection there with a character that apparently there's some history between her and John Hawkes' character, whose name is Hank. And then we kind of switch back to Navarro's character, and there's just some more kind of relationships established there. She gets a troubling call from a fellow police officer that her sister is not doing well. She goes out to visit her, and we see in just a few minutes that her sister is, dealing with some serious sort of mental health issues. And then there's a pretty significant scene where Navarro connects and talks to this guy named Ryan. And he is the brother of Annie K, who is the woman who was killed, who's the old cold case that she's been working on. And there's a few things that we get out of this scene. Ryan first says that the water, like the tap water, went bad 3 days ago. And somehow maybe that has a connection to do with the events from 3 days ago, when all the caribous jumped off the cliff and when all the scientists went missing. It's just something really small, but the 3 days ago just kind of piqued my, interest, I guess. Also, too, he mentions that his sister, Annie K, again, the victim of the cold case, and she protested the mine, which is the main sort of economic output from the town, which is where Ryan worked. And then he asked Navarro if she believes in God, and she says that she does, but she still thinks that they are all alone, and so is God. And this reiterates the opening quote from the episode, and it just kind of, again, sort of reinforces this idea of something supernatural, but this is clearly this sort of God-forsaken place. This is this place in total isolation. It's dark, it's cold, the atmosphere is just dreary and gloomy, and the majority of the people that we are introduced to in this episode seem like they're just, borderline depressed. They're just very miserable. And so the whole thing just kind of has this very dark, dour, gloomy atmosphere to it. A couple other significant moments throughout the episode there are a few times where we randomly cut to this old woman who is having what seem to be these visions of this man who is walking out in the snow, and he doesn't have any shoes on. And in the scene where we're first introduced to her, she's actually outside. She is gutting this, I believe it's a wolf, and she's got this wolf cut open, and it's almost like a blink and you'll miss it moment, but the wolf is clearly dead, but just real quickly, it actually sort of flinches and moves a little bit. And so, you know, again, the darkness, so to speak, is awakening. A little bit later on in the episode, we get a scene where Danvers is in bed sleeping, and she hears this whisper of a young boy, and this small little hand reaches up around her and grabs her shoulder. And we can only guess that perhaps this is her son, who is now passed away. But it's very significant because the boy also whispers the words, "She's awake." Danvers gets up off the bed, looks down on the floor, and there's this small stuffed animal of a polar bear that is missing its eye. And then the following scene, we get Navarro driving through the streets, and she suddenly has to slam on her brakes. She also hears this whisper, we don't know the source of it, that says she's awake. And she happens to see this polar bear crossing the street, and it turns and looks at her, and wouldn't you know, the polar bear only has one eye as well. I don't entirely know yet what the significance of that scene, of those two scenes are, and what the connection is. Again, who's the she and she's awake? I don't really know. There obviously seems to be some sort of connection to Danvers' past. What exactly is the significance of the polar bear? The only thing I can say right now is there's a mention earlier in the episode where Navarro talks about her spirit animal. So I don't entirely know there, but again, as if I haven't said enough, there is this sort of supernatural element here, but perhaps this story is sort of delving into sort of maybe local legend or mythology or folklore and, you know, sort of maybe native spirituality or something like that. But whatever it is, it's definitely got me curious. And then the episode further sort of solidifies this connection, at least it seems to solidify this connection between Annie K and the Salal research station, as Danvers is going over all these photos, and she sees what seems to be is the same jacket that was worn by Annie K is now being worn, or was being worn, by one of the scientists at the Salal research station. And then the episode concludes where we find out that the old woman who's having these visions, her name is Rose, and the man that she's seeing, his name is Travis. Well, Travis is actually dead, but she follows him out into the middle of nowhere, and he points in some general direction, and he points her to this discovery as the episode ends with Danvers and Navarro and a giant police squad helicoptering out to this random location in the ice where we see 3 dead frozen men in the ice, and we're not exactly sure who they are. It seems like they're probably the scientists who went missing, but we're not entirely sure. And then the episode ends. So overall, I think the episode it's pretty good overall. Like I said, it seems that there's just kind of a lot. It has a bit of a sort of a scattered type of approach, and I'm just wondering if they're going to be able to kind of bring and connect everything together in only 6 episodes. But I'm definitely intrigued. I think they've got a pretty interesting story going on. Hit me up down below. Let me know some of your thoughts, theories, I don't know, whatever you think, if you liked it, what you liked about it, all that good stuff. So would love to hear from you. That's all I got for you. And yeah, I'll see you next time on The Haunted Beard.